Hi, friends! Welcome to the Overcomers, a movement and a group of people who have overcome, and they've got a story. That's what the Overcomers is all about. You sharing your story. Why? Because there is power in your story, and people need you. They need your voice. They need your story of hope, faith, and inspiration that where they're at right now is not the end. They need to know if you can overcome, so can they. Today, I'm excited to share with you another story of one such overcomer. So let's go check out who it is.
So I'm honored to be here today with my new friend, Kim Kiser. Kim, thank you so much for joining us today on The Overcomers.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So if you're tuning in today and you haven't had the pleasure of getting introduced to Kim like I just did, I want to share a few things about this amazing woman before we dive into her story. Kim is a mom of 7, joining us from Georgia. She's overcome a lot in life, from her parents' divorce when she was just a child, to depression, anxiety, self-doubt, fear, and the tragic loss of her husband when his heart stopped mid-surgery. Now she is free from anxiety and fear and using her gifts to love and help others where they need healing. But what I'm blown away most by with you, Kim, is your heart. I can't imagine the depth of loss that you've experienced in losing your husband and the father to your 7 children. But the fact that your heart is simply still beating in its aftermath says everything about who you are, who our Creator designed you to be. You are living proof that facing what might feel like the impossible in tragedy is possible to not only navigate, but to continue finding so much more in the aftermath and the life yet to live. Your heart truly loved your husband, but also truly loves your Creator. And the depths of love that he's taking you to is such a beacon of hope for those still hoping to find it and to find him. So without further ado, Kim, take us on that journey. How did you go from where you once were to where you are now? Take us back to that moment.
Well, when my husband went in for surgery, we thought it was going to be a routine surgery to repair some blockages. And so I left all of my children at home. They were ranging in ages from 4 to 17 at the time. My husband did ask to bring Bryce, my 15-year-old. So he was at the hospital with me. But in the moment that we were doing the surgery, we didn't think, anything. It was going to be routine and he would be fine. When his heart stopped in the middle, that's when the doctors realized their original diagnosis was wrong. So he turned out he had blood clots in his lungs. They were able to bring him back at that moment. But I remember in that moment feeling so out of control, so desperate for answers and for help. And it was almost like I knew at that moment that something tragic was going to happen, even though he was still with us. I don't know, in the depths of my soul, I feel like I knew that, so anyway, 10 days later, it was a long it doesn't seem that long to say 10 days, but for me it was a long time. He passed. And so from that moment, I felt defeated, I felt broken, it was almost like someone had taken my life and just dropped it and it shattered in a million pieces. And I had no idea how to gather them back up together. I had no idea how I was going to raise my kids on my own, 7. And the girls were babies. They were 4, 6, and 8 at the time. And the boys were teenagers, and that's all I kept thinking was a father. I mean, children need their father. That's the way God intended it. And so even though I was trusting God in that time and I was walking with him, I think deep down I was confused. I didn't understand how this could possibly be God's will. And I think as Christians, we all go through that and we have these doubts and these fears, and we think, well, maybe I'm not as good a Christian as I thought I was because I'm doubting.
Mm.
But I've learned over the years that that's not true, that God understands our weak frame. He even says it's through our weakness that he is strong. Um, so he understands that. The place where I am now that I wasn't then is I realize that, and I realize that I can confess that. I can admit that, and God will then use that weakness to show up strong. And that's how what he's done in my life. In those 10 days, I was a woman desperate to
Mm.
have my husband okay. And so those days I never left the hospital. I stayed with him all the time. Well, I say that I never came home. I live about 45 minutes to an hour from the hospital where he was, and a good friend of mine lived about 20 minutes. And so at night, I would go sleep at her house and come back first thing the next morning. And so I was with him. But a lot of those hours I spent in the chapel at the hospital and just on my face praying. And, he was not conscious most of the time. So even when I was in there, it's not like we could communicate or whatever, but there were times we could. So I would talk to him, but most of my time I spent on my face praying. And
Mm.
I was praying for him to be okay. I was praying for healing. I was praying for God to heal him. And I was intentionally praying for God to heal him on this side of heaven, not, because of course he's healed. He's perfect now, but that was not my prayer. One of the things that struck me from the very beginning after losing him was I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know who I was. I didn't feel like I knew what I was supposed to do. And it kind of sounds funny to me even now saying that, because I was a mom of seven. I was homeschooling. I was the keeper of the home. I did, I cooked the food. I did the laundry. I schooled. We were homeschooling, and my husband worked, and all of that. But with his absence, I felt lost. Like I literally felt like I didn't even know how to homeschool anymore. I didn't feel like and I think part of like the depression was setting in at that point too, that I didn't want to do anything. Um, but slowly over time, as I sought the Lord and as I prayed and as because I truly was praying, was like, Lord, tell me now, who am I? Tell
Mm.
me what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to walk each day, And it was just slowly over time, he began to reveal to me that I was placing my identity and my worth and my value in all of those roles that he had given me. For example, wife and mother and teacher and homeschooler. And I, now that the wife was taken away, I was starting to question everything. And I think the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome was, where is my worth now? Where is my value? Because apparently it's got to be something, it has to be something that I do or something that I produce. And what he taught me was, no, it's none of those things.
Mm.
Your identity is in me. And I I made you and I created you, therefore you have value and you have worth. And it was at that moment when I was like, okay, I need to stop striving. I need to stop trying. I need to stop pushing for this, I don't know, nebulous idea of who I am or who I should be, and rest in the fact that I am God's child and I am here to glorify him and to be responsible for the things he's given me,
Mm.
namely my children, and to raise them and to give them the things that they need. And by doing that, he was going to add everything else to me that I needed.
Wow. Wow, friend. So you really went through rewiring of who you are and in your identity in going through this loss and the aftermath of this loss. How did he start to show you who you are? How did that start to be revealed to you?
Well, so I I met Jen during that time, our friend. Some people may know her, some may not. And a group of other friends that had all gone through the same business coaching that you've been through. And I kind of, started following some of them, started, uh, really seeking Father God and praying with the intention of hearing. You know, I grew up where prayer was something that you said to God and you talk to him, but I never really was taught how he talks back. And so it was through that time that I started learning, wait a second, this is a conversation. Like I'm supposed to be hearing from him, not just talking to him.
Mm.
So I started learning that. And then one of the ways in those early years, within the first couple of years after I lost my husband, I was still in that mode of what do I do now? Like I have to create a new identity. And I think that was one of the ways I dealt with the grief was if I can just kind of get myself out of where I am right now and into something new, then I can process all of this. And one of the ways I did that was I opened my own business. My husband and I had always talked about owning our own business. I had ideas over the years, and he was always very supportive, but he always would say, well, you need to write a business plan. And I'd be like, I don't know how to write a business plan. And, I was busy with the kids and everything never turned out. But anyway, I found myself in a position to be able to open a business. And so I did that. And he blessed that. He really did. He opened doors. He made things possible that I never would have dreamed. And we created this, I say we, some friends and I, we created this business and it was great. But as I was doing that and walking through that, the Lord became even more, I guess, real to me. Not that real, that's not the right word, but I was leaning more and more on him as I was walking through that, because as you can imagine, owning and running your own business is very intense. And there were things that I look back now and I'm like, there's no way I could have done that. There's no way that those things would have happened if it hadn't been for the Lord directing me and guiding me. And so I just found myself relying on him on all new levels that I never had before. And I have to admit, before my husband passed, I was very much, I guess you call like a type A personality. I had to have everything this way. And because it made me feel like I had control of the situation. But losing my husband made me realize that I have no control. And so rather than relying on myself or relying on my husband, I started relying on God in a much, much deeper way than I ever had before. I'm sorry, I'm losing sight of what was the question again, because I feel like I'm going.
Your answer has been phenomenal, even if you have lost sight of it. So the question was, how did he start showing you who you are?
Oh, okay. So 3 years into the business, I began to feel God calling me to a new place, to a new to who I really was, who and where he wanted me to be. And I started hearing this from him, and it was a little confusing at the time because here I was in the thick of the business, and I'm like, but Lord, this is what I'm doing. Like this is what where you have me. But I felt him pulling me out of that, and I started losing my passion for the business. I started losing my desire to be there. I started focusing more on this new word that I was hearing from him, and it was healing. It was just healing. That's all that was coming to me, healer. And so I really started to spend more time with him, asking him to show me. And it was that last that last year of owning the bakery, I really thought, okay, Lord, I feel like you're leading me into this new area, that's leading me into this thing, which I have no idea what it is. Kind of like Abraham's like, okay, go, but I don't know where to go. But I said, okay, but I need to sell the bakery then. I need to, move on to this next thing. And that wasn't happening. And that was very frustrating. And so I finally surrendered one day. I said, okay, Lord, I must be hearing something different than what you're actually saying. So I'm going to lay it all down. I'm surrendering to you. I'm going to be the best business owner that I can possibly be. And I'm going to accept the fact that this is the place where you have for me right now in my life. And I really, truly was content with that. I felt so much peace. And I thought, this is where he has me. It was a month later, maybe 6 weeks later, that he brought 2 potential buyers to me, 2 offers, and I sold the business. And it was about 6 months after selling the business that he began to reveal to me what this healer thing meant. And I started meeting people. I started learning things that has really brought me to where I am right now and to the new things that are going on in my life.
That's amazing. So you definitely have an amazing, and I'm noticing you have an amazing ability to trust that voice that you've been hearing, that voice who has been revealing himself to you as you were engaging with him, and realizing that there's this dynamic of a relationship of not only me talking to him, but listening for what he says. So where do you think that trust comes from? Because I'm sure many people can relate to, I'm talking to God, and sometimes I wonder, is this him? Is this not him? Is this myself? But you seem to know this is him. And you, whether you always know what to do or what the right action is, it's him. So where do you think that trust in his voice comes from?
I heard somebody say recently, though, and I thought this was really good. She said, if you feel angst or anxiousness or unrest about what you've heard, then that probably is not from God, because those things aren't from God. What's the verse? What's the verse about fear? Fear does not come from God, and any kind of confusion is not from God. So I'll give you an example. I was praying through whether or not to go to this particular school for grad school, and at first I thought, this is it, this is the place, and I was certain that it was the right thing. But when my acceptance came in, I don't know, I felt confused about it, and I didn't feel settled about it, and I didn't feel like it was the thing I wanted to do. And it was strange, because weeks before I had thought. So I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I was listening for him. I was like, Lord, tell me, is this the right thing for me to do? Is this where you have me to go next? And he was radio silent, like nothing. And I'm thinking, okay, why won't you answer me? I'm sitting here, and I prayed and prayed and prayed. Several days later, I was praying about it again, and I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to tell you what I think. And I said, I think this is the wrong place for me. And I don't know if it's just the wrong place, if it's the wrong time, if it's the wrong, degree, way to study, but something is wrong, and I'm not going to do it. And as soon as I said that, this peace just poured over me. And this just assurance poured over me of, that's it, that's the right decision. And so it was kind of weird. It was almost like he was waiting for me to come to that realization that he had already told me. I just wasn't listening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Answer your question, I don't always have that certainty, because I do. There are times where I'm like, did I just think that, or did he just say that? But I think the biggest way that I can hear him now is